Okay, hello everyone, welcome and good afternoon. My name is Jordan McCauley. I'm Travel Oregon's Destination Development Coordinator. You are in the Oregon Outdoor Recreation Summit's webinar, USDA Rural Development Opportunities and Financing to Support Tourism and Recreation. Looks like Tim just joined there. Tim, good to see you.
Yeah, no kidding.
We're going to kick off here. I'll give us a quick intro and then pass it over to our presenter, Tim, to take it away for the session. So we're going to kick off with just a few housekeeping notes, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page with the flow of the session before we kick off. First note is that the session will be recorded. The slide deck and the presentation will be available on Travel Oregon's YouTube channel later this fall, and we'll be sending a link out to all summit attendees once that's available. Second note is that throughout the session, we'll be using the Q&A feature to engage with attendees. So feel free to submit questions through Q&A, which is a button on the center bottom of your screen. You can submit questions throughout Tim's entire presentation, and we will be reading them and answering them during a dedicated 15-minute Q&A section at the end of the presentation today. We'll do our best to get to all the questions, so feel free to plug in anything that comes up as Tim is presenting. And then lastly, at the end of the session, you'll see that a survey link will pop up in your Zoom web browser. We'd love to hear your feedback on the session, what was valuable to you, or how we could improve. So please feel free to take 2 minutes to share your thoughts with us at the end of the session around 2:30. All right, so that wraps up housekeeping notes. And now I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, Tim O'Connell. He's here on the line with us. Tim is the West Region Coordinator of the Innovation Center for the USDA Rural Development. Tim became the West Region Coordinator in May of 2016, and USDA Rural Development delivers over 40 loan and grant programs in the areas of affordable housing, business and economic development, and community infrastructure. The team works to improve program delivery and equip rural development staff with the economic development needs and tools necessary to drive prosperity in rural communities. Tim helps to coordinate and collaborate with other federal agencies involved in rural economic development across the West region. And prior to Tim's move to Portland, Oregon, he spent 26 years in Hilo, Hawaii with rural development in various roles. So today, Tim's going to share more with us about opportunities offered by the USDA Rural Development. And we hope to really bring awareness and understanding around rural development efforts, loans, and financing programs. All right, and Tim, I will go ahead and pass it over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and we can kick off the presentation. Thanks for being here, everyone.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. I'm going to bring up my PowerPoint presentation here. Is it showing up?
Let's see. Yep, looks good.
All right. So thank you, Jordan, for the opportunity to speak today about rural development programs in this area of recreation economy. My goal today is kind of cover 3 areas. I'm going to talk about an overview of USDA Rural Development and who we are and what we do. Second thing, I'm going to talk about a toolkit that we put together for USDA Rural Development, partnership with other federal agencies around the recreation economy. The third thing is to kind of give some examples of where we finance projects in rural communities around the recreation economy, to give participants kind of an idea of what kinds of information and projects that we have funded in the past, and maybe pick some ideas. But overall, rural development is part of the larger USDA mission area. There's 8 total mission areas. And a lot of people oftentimes wonder, how does USDA Rural Development get involved in the recreation space? And there's a little bit of history to that, and I'll go over that as well. But anyway, we're one of 8 missionaries within USDA, and we provide loans and grants in rural areas and many different topics, and I'll be going over, doing a kind of a broad brush stroke of what some of those programs are that are available to our rural communities. Just quickly, here's an overview of the USDA organization chart at the national level to give people kind of a perspective. We fit under, like I said, the Undersecretary for Rural Development, and we have 3 main programs that we cover, our 3 funding buckets: rural housing, rural utilities, and rural business and cooperative service. And under each of those program areas, we have the programs we actually deliver. And these are our financing programs we have. And like it said in the bio that I put together, we have over 40 different loan and grant programs that we have available. And we kind of have an older tagline that says we can build the community from the ground up, just because of the broad brush of the programs that we do administer and have throughout our rural areas. We're one of the few federal agencies that still has a field presence. We have basically 4 regions, and like I'm the West Region Coordinator for the Innovation Center, and so I cover the light blue, even though I'm based in Portland, Oregon. We have a staff, 47 state offices, over 400 area offices. Of course, our national office is in Washington, D.C. Each of our 47 state offices are headed by a presidential appointee or state director. And under that state director, we have program directors that actually are head of the different programs that I previously mentioned, rural business, rural housing, and rural utilities. And under each of those people, they have state loan staff and the area people that kind of provide support for the program. So basically, we're an agency of loan people, loan staff. And then some of our programs are administered at the state level. So we get a national, so when we do get a budget, we get some of our programs that are allocated to the states. So the state of Oregon would have X amount of dollars to spend. Other programs come from the national allocation, and we compete nationally for those types of programs. And it's just, it varies depending on how the program is structured within the authorizing legislation. But some of our, on the utility side, we have general field representatives or GFRs that actually cover multi-states. And then the Innovation Center, which I work for, is based out of Washington, D.C., but we're located out in the field as well. So we kind of cover the broad spectrum of the different parts of the country. For Oregon specifically, the state office is located in Portland. Even though I covered the 13 western states, I am headquartered out of the Portland RD office. It just was a good location to work out of the west for. But as far as Oregon-specific applications and inquiries, we do have offices in Tangent, Roseburg, Redmond, as well as Pendleton and LeGrand. So we do have a pretty good outreach effort for people to access our staff throughout the state. Here's a kind of a quick summary or look at the Oregon RD website. If you have any information or you want any information on what's going to happen in Oregon specific, that website is rd.usda.gov/OR for Oregon. And these slides are and will be available afterwards. So don't worry about writing down any of the information. These slides will be made available to the participants. Like I said, I work for the Innovation Center. This was an entity that was established within this administration to kind of bridge the gap and the linkages between the 3 programs we have: the business side, the housing side, and the utility side, and in also connecting with our federal, state, and local partners in delivering programs where we haven't been and where we need to be as far as economic development in our programs. So the Innovation Center is kind of the cross-cutting and connecting entity. And we have 3 divisions within the Innovation Center. We have a data analytics side that basically looks at data in our program delivery so we can do data decision making. Again, putting our investments where they're most likely to succeed and have the highest impact. We have a regulations management division that actually looks at and streamlining and improving the regulations that we have. Because one of the things that I think people recognize that have tried and have been involved with rural development is our programs aren't the easiest to access. And that's kind of why we have the innovation centers, to help bridge that gap, build the capacity, and then have also a department, the Regulations Management Division, to look at actually streamlining the regulations that we do have. And then the third component is the Partnerships Division, which I work for. And that's basically, we're set up regionally. I'm based, like I said, out of Portland, to work with our external partners like Travel Oregon and some of the other entities, and delivering the programs that we have into areas that that need our programs, that maybe not are aware of them. Again, that's part of the purpose of having this webinar today, is to let people know about some of the different potential resources that are out there. Like I said, we are a funding agency. If you take our total portfolio, we are about the 5th largest bank in the U.S. So we do have a lot of different programs. Fiscal year 2019, we did about $28 billion in programs, an overall portfolio of about $232 billion. So we do have and put a lot of money out in the rural communities. Our biggest one is our housing programs. I'll be covering that a little bit later. But we do have a lot of different other programs we cover as well. And most of our programs are loans. We have grants as well, but they're usually a lot smaller and a lot more strategic in how we utilize them. So a lot of funding are ours available, but again, most of it is in the loan side. So I'm going to real briefly kind of go over some of the different major programs that we have, to kind of give you a broad brush stroke of what is available. You know, as a loan agency, we do 2 types of funding. We do a direct loan, where the government is the loan officer and does the underwriting and collects the payments. And then we have a guaranteed loan, where actually we work with a bank, and the bank does the work. We just guarantee that loan against the default. And so our biggest loan program under our business side is our business industry loan guarantee, and that's where rural businesses, or businesses in rural areas, that can access that through a bank to basically finance a business, whether that's to convert, to enlarge, repair, or develop the physical infrastructure, to expand, purchase equipment, machinery, hire additional staff, and working capital. And this is probably the biggest, the most prevalent program that we've used in the recreation economy before. And I'll begin some examples, but a lot of ski areas in the West have utilized this business industry guaranteed loan program for accessing credit where credit wasn't available otherwise. Another business program, we have a renewable energy program, which is unique, that we provide direct assistance to small businesses and farmers and ranchers through a grant program in conjunction with the loan. We can provide energy efficiency improvements, do renewable energy systems. We also have a biofuels, which isn't really particularly relevant to the recreation economy, but the renewable energy is, because it does help lower the operation costs of businesses. It is one tool to help businesses as they try to navigate the new reality of what's going on with the economy these days. So we do have an energy program that does provide loans and grants for these types of systems. On the electric side, we support infrastructure through the electric programs. We work in partnership with the rural electric cooperatives and other utility systems to build, maintain, and grow rural America's rural electric infrastructure systems. This program has been around since the 1930s, and actually was credited for electrifying the West. Again, people often ask when they learn that USDA is involved in financing, they wonder how. And basically, during the Depression eras of the 1920s and 30s, rural areas couldn't access credit because the banks were failing. And so Congress created a program specifically on the electric side to help rural communities access capital to put electric and distribution lines into rural areas. And as that model worked and rural communities became electrified, they also found issues with housing. So, and a lot of banks wouldn't want to loan in rural areas. So Congress created a housing program to help rural areas build out their housing infrastructure. And same with the utility side too. So that's why we're in the business we are in, because oftentimes banks didn't want to go into rural areas. And so Congress created a program to fill that gap, not to replace or to compete with banks, but actually to provide credit where credit wasn't actually being provided. Our utility service, probably one of the most popular nowadays is telecommunications. Again, this program got started out in the 1930s and 40s with providing telephone service to the rural areas. And being adaptive, we've created opportunities to bring broadband to rural areas to these programs. And we're seeing now with the COVID-19 and the stay-at-home orders and the pivoting to people working remotely, school going remotely, healthcare going remotely, we're finding that broadband is a huge need. It's been exacerbated by what's going on. So we have programs that can help actually bridge that digital divide. And we have some loan programs, again, some grant programs, again, to help rural communities. And, you know, one of the things the Innovation Center also does is we help build capacity. And so, you know, I'm going to take a little bit side tangent here, but around the capacity building and with broadband service, a lot of communities need broadband, but they don't know necessarily the questions to ask or the technology. So in partnership with other federal agencies, last year we did some workshops in conjunction with National Telecommunications and Information Administration, NTIA, with Economic Development Administration, EDA, and the Oregon State Broadband Office. We did a couple of pilot capacity building workshops in rural areas, one in Madras and one in Independence. Again, to provide some tools and information to the communities, the participants, so they would know, again, trying to access some of the program that is available out there, because as you know, accessing these programs oftentimes isn't the easiest way to, it isn't easy to try to navigate the system. So we try to bring the capacity and bring the skill sets to the rural areas to those types of workshops. And again, that was just an example. And we can also probably pivot and do that with some of the recreation work that we're doing as well. Some other programs that we have available on the water environmental programs, we provide water and safe water sourcing, treatment, storage, and distribution, sewer collection, and other types of programs for this environmental side. And, you know, some of the work I've been doing with our partners across the West, a lot of rural communities are needing this kind of infrastructure for their recreation economy. As visitors come and use the facilities, a lot of the infrastructure isn't at capacity or needs to be increased for the water and especially with the sewer system. So this is an opportunity to help with the capacity, or not capacity, but the infrastructure part with these programs. And again, with our 40 plus that we have, there are different eligibility requirements for each of them. And that's, you know, one of the downsides of this is that since we do have a lot, but there's also a lot of different types of requirements for these. Some have a population limit of 10,000, some have a population of 20,000, some have a population of 50,000. But that's the most population that we can do with any of our programs, because we are rural development. We are focused on rural areas, is a population cap of 50,000. In next program I want to really touch is our community facilities. I call this our nonprofit financing arm. Again, loans and grants for essential community infrastructure. We provide fire and rescue stations, town halls, hospital, community care clinics, adult and child care centers, public buildings, schools, libraries, can be used for a whole host of different potential community infrastructure. And again, this can be a low interest loan. We also have a new guaranteed loan authority for this, as well as a potential for grants. And with this program on the grant side, generally that's tied to the median household income of the area. It's a matching grant, so we can go from 35 to 75% grant on this program specifically. But again, a small pot of money for the grant and larger pot of money for the loan side. And finally, we all recognize that lack of affordable housing in our rural areas is a huge need. Whether you're a gateway community with a natural asset like in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or even any small rural community that hasn't had housing built in a while, and I'm talking about affordable housing, not necessarily in the traditional sense of the low income, but actually even just the medium or the mid-income people, your firemen and your police officers and your nurses, and attracting that type to your community, that housing stock oftentimes isn't available. So we have programs that actually help alleviate that. Biggest portfolio that we have is in our single family housing mortgages, where we directly work with borrowers to build or purchase their new first home. And we have a guaranteed program as well, where we work with banks to help guarantee loans for single family. But we also have some programs for multifamily, where we provide assistance either through a direct guaranteed loan for building multi-unit apartments and housing in our rural areas. And we also have some low-income repair loans available as well, again, dependent on some income and age requirements there. That's just a brief snapshot of the different programs that we have. There's a website up. Here's kind of a snapshot of our PDF file that lists all the programs. And again, I'd urge you to reach out to find out if you would like more information about each of these. We have fact sheets for the programs. And one of the things that, what I'm trying to get across to as I talk about our programs is that there's a lot of work that needs to be put in to help, I guess, package it for our staff. Recognizing that you're trying to come to an investable decision here and making the best case forward, that often takes some pre-work to figure out exactly, what kind of program you want to access. And the first thing when people call me and say that they want a loan or grant, I ask them, what's the first thing you want to spend money on? If you were to get a loan or grant, which kind of helps drives the program that you want to go into. So there's a lot of different components in trying to access our programs, but again, we're here to help, and we do have state office staff that are willing to help, as well as the Innovation Center staff that are willing to help as well. So I'm going to pivot now to my second point, or second part of this presentation, is talk about the resource guide that we recently published, Recreation Economy at USDA, Economic Development Resources for Rural Communities. And there's a link to that PDF file, and I'm going to go over that, kind of just give you some background information on how it came about and what it's being used for. One of the things that we're finding is that in the 2018 Farm Bill, and the Farm Bill is actually the program, the language that gives or USDA a lot of its funding authorities. And in the 2018 Farm Bill, there was a Council on Rural Community Innovation and Economic Development that was stood up. And one of its missions is actually to look at a call to action about identifying and facilitating rural economic opportunities associated with outdoor recreation. So at the national level, we're finding that there is a push towards USDA involvement in the recreation economy. And one of the things this administration did when they first came was there was a task force for the Interagency Task Force on Rural Prosperity in Agriculture. And basically that task force issued 5 findings that we're, as an agency, that we're kind of following as our guideposts as we look at working with our rural communities. Of course, the big one is achieving e-connectivity for rural America, improving the rural quality of life, supporting a rural workforce, harnessing technological innovation, and finally developing the rural economy, which all these calls to action support the recreation economy, because we're seeing in some of the data that's being published, whether it's through Economic Research Service or other private areas, that the rural recreation economy is actually one of the bigger drivers in a lot of our areas. And that's where we have a big interest in supporting this, because it is kind of the new wave, although a lot of people involved in it for years and years, you know, probably saying, why you guys are late to the game here, but we're recognizing that nationally that it is an important component of our portfolio mix, is having recreation projects. And we have, one of the things, unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of, or enough time, because I could go on for a very long time about the different programs, but we have some capacity building technical assistance grants under our community facilities and our business programs that can be used for some of this planning that is kind of outlined in this resource guide. And these financing and planning tools can help many communities that need to develop a roadmap to build out the recreation economy. And after a master plan has been developed, a lot of our existing programs can be utilized for infrastructure supporting the recreation economy. And one of the examples that, again, was actually as an Oregon example, is that last year, the Forest Service, U.S. Forest Service, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, came out with an RFP to do a technical assistance project around the recreation economy. And our agency helped review the applications. There was 170 that applied, and only 10 were selected for this round of technical assistance, and one of them actually happened to be in Oregon, John Day, Oregon, as a matter of fact. And so they're in the process. We just did a virtual 2-day session last week about some of the issues of this and the concepts about out of this recreation resource guide. A planning component with the community about how do you build out this recreation economy in our area. So we're pleased at the Innovation Center to introduce this recreation guide. And again, the link is on this site here, so feel free to take a look at that. I'm going to kind of just do a real quick intro of the guide itself. Of course, the table of context, we're looking at you know, the recreation as a kind of a broad stroke about what it is, some factors to consider in building the recreation economy. When we talk about some of the Forest Service and RD programs, which I've highlighted on the rural development side, and then another partner, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture and land grant universities, and some of the information they could bring to the table. And the guide was developed to help rural communities consider some of the following factors to help support the recreation economy by helping to connect local and regional resources and natural resource planning to better integrate policies and projects both within the forest and other natural resource areas and our gateway communities. To help identify critical issues through strategic stakeholder involvement, to use SMART goals and develop strategies that most likely to result in some outcomes, and then identify some potential funding sources for plan implementation. And so again, this guide is developed to help with answering some of those questions. Again, looking at the inside of the guide, looking at how USDA agencies partner to provide recreation assistance. A section on additional resources, not only from rural development and Forest Service, but some other potential ones as well. And then we talk about success stories again, because it's one of the things that we like to do is kind of show, instead of me talking on and on about programs, to give some examples of what we have as done as far as the different examples for projects funded. So the partners U.S. Forest Service, National Institute for NEFA, Land Grant Universities, and Rural Development. This was put together again as a guide because we have a vested interest in economic development, and the agencies we help coordinate and collaborate on this. And since this was just recently published, we've actually been working on it for a while. One of the outcomes of this is that there's actually other federal land partners, National Park Service, Bureau of Land Management. So we're actually looking at a version 2.0 and including some of those agency programs in this as well as we move forward. So we're, again, looking to develop some additional partnerships and looking at our forest adjacent communities. We looked at, again, using the Forest Service expertise on their forests, looking at the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, or NEFA, the research and education arm, as far as bringing that to the table. And of course, what we do is financing our different programs. And then Extension Service has a network of extension professionals dedicated to the recreation economy. And Oregon, through Oregon State University, actually has several that are dedicated specifically to the recreation economy. So again, if you need a contact for those individuals, I can provide that after or put your name in the chat box so I can get back to you to that. And again, what we bring to the table is the financing for infrastructure and business development. So this is, again, the third part and the final part of my presentation today. Talk about some opportunities and challenges. We know that we're in a pretty good place here, but a lot of older economic development strategies used to talk about smokestack chasing, about trying to get the bigger industries to come in to help the rural economies. But many small 1 to 10 person employee companies are actually the ones that are helping our rural communities, the 1 to 10 employee businesses. And we're seeing that a lot of our economic drivers these days is from the recreation component. Trailhead communities need bike shops, restaurants, lodging, and other types of economic development to support that economy. So that, again, we're looking at those types of different opportunities with our funding and with our different partnerships to develop some of the hopefully bridge some of the technology and the financing gaps as we move forward. So how does RD programs help rural recreation? Well, here's some examples from across the country that I'll share with you briefly. Up in the Vermont community facilities, this $175,000 grant for the 14-mile stretch of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. This project included surface access and drainage improvements, vegetation clearing, and redecking the bridge. So it actually, again, was more of a trail type project. North Carolina, $5.9 million loan to purchase and develop the Stinger Park to be used by Bessemer City. The park contains trails, playgrounds, a splash pad, concessions, and restroom buildings. So again, a loan to build out and purchase of a park for a community. Washington State used energy loan, a REAP grant and loan to put in energy efficiencies improvements for their ski lift. Again, help reduce their operating costs through the less use of energy. And in Nevada, I used a guaranteed business program, $2.4 million. Let's see, for a that was for a helicopter and lift. Let's see, a heliport for the helicopter tours to basically take people out to the backcountry. So again, showing the different breadth of the programs that we've used for the different projects around. In Vermont Land Trust, $164,000 grant to build a 400-foot boardwalk connecting various scenic points in the downtown Newport, Vermont area. 1 mile multi-use path to connect the downtown to a rail trail, building a bridge, a new path to provide basically foot traffic and connect with the Canadian trail system. The Michigan Community Facilities loan of $1.4 million was for street and sidewalk improvements. Some of the downtown area, there was no sidewalks, so they put in some sidewalks and some other grading and paving improvements. And then and the Ohio Rural Business Development grant of $79,000 was basically to develop a training program for technical assistance and develop a revolving loan program designed to help current startup ventures to market their products and services through the recreation economy. So again, a mix of loans and grants, different parts of the country, different uses. So just again, an example of some of the information that's potentially available and the uses of our funds. So this is kind of wrapping up the presentation here. Because as Innovation Center, try to think outside the box. And so some of the potential projects we've seen, excuse me, housing, like I mentioned, is a big need, and of course the cost of land, especially in some of our more popular areas where there's recreation. So we've explored using federal lands in Jackson, Wyoming for rural housing in partnership with the Forest Service and our multifamily housing program. We've used business funding for Forest Service concessionaires as a potential, using community-owned visitor or camping facilities as a potential. And one of the exciting projects, and this gets to the planning component, is up in Idaho, the Forest Service reached out to Rural Development because of our Recreation Economy Guide and asked about, because the forest has to put together a forest plan. And then, of course, we have economic development plans that happen sometimes in isolation. So with that effort, we're looking at combining the Economic Development Administration SEDS process with the National Forest System Land Management Planning, and actually looking both in and outside of the forest for that type of joint community planning activity so that everybody's on the same page. And of course, that broadband deployment, that's again one of the biggest drivers in rural areas, and it's an important part of the recreation economy. So that kind of wraps up. Hopefully you got something out of today. We do have a lot of loan and grant programs. They're not easy, but they are accessible. So is there any questions in the chat that came up, Jordan, while I was rambling on?
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for the presentation, Tim. That was really informative, and there's clearly a lot of ways to tap into the USDA resources. So thank you so much. Yes, we did receive quite a few really great questions. So I'll dive right into them so we have a lot of time to answer as many possible. Let's see, the first one is actually there's two questions geared around types of lands that USDA is able to support with grants and loans. Are there any restrictions to the type of lands that you can support? And then the second part to that question is, are there loans and grants available for tribal lands?
The answer to both questions is yes. Basically, I'm assuming the first part of the question has to do with types of lands, whether it's leased land or fee simple, which is kind of the security component that a lot of people ask. And so I'm assuming that's what that means. So we do financing on both fee simple and leased land. I mean, I spent 26 years in Hawaii, and part of our jurisdiction was in Micronesia. And so we did be quite creative in coming up with instruments that would actually secure our loan on land that actually wasn't fee simple. So we do that type. We've also worked with Forest Service, done projects on Forest Service land where there's been a long-term, as long as our lease or other instrument is longer than our loan, then we're good with that because we can secure that. And the second part of the question is that we do work with tribes all the time. We have an Office of Tribal Relations at the USDA level, and then with the Innovation Center, we actually have 2 tribal staff liaisons that kind of help bridge our financing programs with some of the unique challenges that tribes face with some of the land alienation issues. So yes, the answer to both questions is yes, we can.
Awesome, great, thank you. And actually, Tim, I'll have you stop sharing your screen just for this portion so we can see your full face for now.
Okay, let me find the Zoom part.
Yeah, you should be able to hit stop share.
A big red button that says stop share, imagine that. How's that?
Yeah. Okay, another question here. Can the Community Facilities Program fund infrastructure like park and trailhead facilities and restrooms?
The short answer is yes, but. And that's a loaded question because traditionally in our direct loan program, it specifically states in one of our regulations we don't fund recreation projects. But it doesn't define what recreation is. And so it's so old in the regulation that people just say, well, we don't do recreation. But as you saw with my examples, and that's the purpose of providing the examples, that we do use community facilities programs for recreation type projects. It's a framing question, quite honestly. It's a project development question because it isn't a recreation restroom project, it's a restroom project, period. It isn't a trail project, it's a transportation corridor project. So it's the framing, and we're continuously, and it's like, I use this analogy is that there's a lot of staff that think that term recreation means the old term of golf courses and stuff, which was prohibited. And we have new terminology, which is the expansion into a healthier type of lifestyle. And it's like me as a parent, as my kids grow up, they're taking the terms that I've used and completely changing the meaning of them. And we're doing that internally with recreation as well. And it doesn't mean what it used to, it means this now, which is a more holistic look. So yes, we can use community facilities, but we just have to kind of bridge that old term versus the new use gap. So we're in transition with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, great. A few questions related to grants specifically. Let's see, when applying for a grant or loan, what type of organization would be best as the lead applicant? Some examples could be city or county, government versus a trail organization. Have any feedback on that?
Well, it depends. And put my loan officer hat on, it would be the applicant with the biggest and deep pockets and the most capacity and the best financial background. Again, with the 40 different loan and grant programs, there's such variability. That would take kind of a one-on-one to really figure that out. And that's the service that we try to provide, is to come up with those scenarios because there are multiple partners out there, and one entity may be better than other depending on the funding source. And we're not the only funding source either. We capital stack a lot. So we work with, say, the state of Oregon. We work with regional partners. We work with other federal partners in kind of seeing where the best money goes with a project. And that's kind of getting back to the John Day example, is that they put together a prospectus for federal partners, and a bunch of federal partners. This was an EDA-led process. And so, we came together and said, okay, this is what we can do. And another agency came together and said, this is what we can do. And started putting all this together. So John Day was actually able to get a reconnect grant for broadband because of that process. So I think it's more it's the talking to the RD staff up front before you actually start going through the paperwork process.
Mm-hmm. Great, and I'm assuming USDA has a lot of staff available to kind of help consult people as they think about going through the process.
Well, I would suggest coming through me to start with as a filter, because we do have a lot of staff that they're brilliant, yeah, but we've been short-staffed, so they are, you know, just they're busy getting out the money right now, and so I'm not to leave them out of the conversation, but I can help do that pre-filter for them. And again, having a broader knowledge of not just our programs, but other programs as well, might be able to steer someone to a better fit.
Absolutely. Great. Okay, shifting gears a little bit. Thank you for all of that input, Tim. Question from someone, an attendee. Are there any affordable housing programs that could help with temporary housing for seasonal employees?
We have a farm labor housing program. Yes, we do. And you can
for seasonal.
Yes, it's specifically farm labor housing. That's what it's called. It can be used for seasonal migrant type work. There, again, with any of our programs, there's do's and don'ts, cans and cannots. But it is the concept of that program to build on or off farm labor housing. And we've used it for other sources as well.
Yeah, I kind of had a similar question, actually. I was curious, at working for Travel Oregon, we know that a lot of tourism focused communities might have a lot of seasonal workers come in if they experience high tourism during a few months out of the year versus a lower season in the winter. Maybe they're busier in the summer. Is there seasonal housing for kind of tourism based employees that are maybe, I guess would be a good example. You mentioned that earlier.
Well, that's a good question. I've never been asked that, so that's something to take a deep dive on, and I can actually do some research and get back to. I'm assuming that this is an ongoing series, right? So people are signed up for other webinars, and we do have their web or addresses, so I can follow up and see whether it's specifically for farm labor or if it can be expanded to any kind of rural use.
Great, awesome.
That's a good question.
Awesome. Yeah, we will. Yes, we have attendee emails. So if you have any extra piece of information or resources you want to share, we could definitely share that out. So,
okay.
So we'll be in touch on that. Let's see, skimming through the questions a little bit more. Okay. How do you make sure these developmental projects don't damage sensitive areas while still bringing people to the rural areas? So that's also
that's actually that's another whole webinar. Yeah. And we, as federal agencies, any federal dollar that goes out there has to have a NEPA process, the National Environmental Protection Act. So we have various levels of review that we go through before we loan or grant anybody or anything. And we do that through the State Historic Preservation Office. We in consultation with state partners and EPA. So we're very conscious that, and actually that's one of the biggest complaints that we get is that our NEPA process takes way too long. But we are following the letter of the law on that and making sure that we are compliant with NEPA.
Yeah, and does that process kick off as someone is applying to a grant, or is that while the grant's been submitted? I guess I'm just helping people kind of navigate maybe timeline on that.
Well, first, like some of our simpler grants, if it's equipment, it's a lot less of a impact because, you know, it's a bigger impact if we build something or move dirt. So oftentimes there's some, we do let people know aware because we sometimes can't obligate any money before we actually have that done. And so and oftentimes we can't advance money until that's done. So there's different checkpoints along the way, depending on the level of review. I mean, a simple, you know, if you're going to apply for a $50,000 grant for, you know, to do, to repair an existing bathroom, it's not going to be as level if you're going to go put in a brand new bathroom somewhere that hadn't had one before, type of thing. So yeah. Like everything else I've talked about, it depends.
Yes, yes. It's all very situational. That makes sense.
Yep.
Okay, this is a bit of a broad question, but I think you spoke to it a bit during your presentation, but maybe if you could dive into just generally the USDA what they look for in a successful grant application. Any key pieces that people should be thinking about if they're thinking about applying?
Yeah, I have a very simple and easy grant overview process, grant training. Read the directions, follow the directions. Pretty simple.
That's it.
Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, that's what it comes down to, because our notices come out, and and actually, I guess the third component is talk to your RD staff about it, because they know. And it's oftentimes people try to shoehorn a project that clearly doesn't fit. And for example, we just did a Rural Placemaking Innovation Challenge. We had $1 million nationwide, and we got 67 applications, and about half of them were deemed ineligible because in the instruction that says you have to have a 15% match from other than yourself. Some people came in with 12% match. Well, guess what? 12 does not equal 15. It's pretty simple. Read the directions and follow the directions. And if you have questions, there's always a contact in any notice that comes out. We're all human beings on this side. Just call us and say, hey, what does this mean?
Yeah, definitely.
And don't wait for the last second. If the deadline is 11:59 Eastern on March 3rd, I don't know how many applications we get at 11:58.
Mm-hmm.
Just people are procrastinators, so don't procrastinate either.
Yeah. Okay. Great tip. Yeah, it's a long process, and that's good to know that there's people available for support. People could call you up. I think it's a good reminder that people reviewing the grants are also just human, and yeah, it helps to talk it through sometimes before you dive in.
Well, for example, I give you the state structure, right? We have 47 state offices. Each of those state offices, if it's a national program, is to get most dollars they can for their state. So we want good applications. We want to fund good projects. So, we're in it. It's a win-win.
Yeah, great. Okay, it looks like we'll have time for probably one more question here. Which funding mechanisms are available to nonprofits partnering with local jurisdictions to develop park and trail facilities?
That would probably be our community facilities loan and grant program, which is our biggest, our most broad, but also the most narrow. Unfortunately, it comes down to it needs to be developed as far as the project and how it's framed. Because community facilities is for nonprofits, and we can use our business and industry guaranteed loan program, but we're again bringing in a third party, a bank. So we actually are on our guaranteed loans. Our customer isn't the community; our customer is the bank, and so we work with the bank and they do all the underwriting. So that's why our community facilities direct is usually the better product if we can frame it right and bring it in. So it's a transportation project or a health and wellness project with some recreation components behind it.
Okay, great. Awesome. I'll give anyone maybe 2 more seconds to throw in any final questions into the chat. Looks like we might have a couple more minutes. Oh, here's one.
Well,
how do we sign up for the grant and loan notices?
Well, there is a grants.gov, but boy, that's like taking water from a fire hose because there's so much information comes out. And what I do in my role is I've been developing to just add people to my distribution list that I have. And if something that's geographic or situational, I will send it out. We also have our Innovation Center Matters. I can maybe send that link to our participants because our Innovation Center puts out a monthly newsletter about different resources across the U.S. The Oregon's Rural Development Office, the Public Information Officer has a listserv that she does specifically for Oregon stuff as well, announcements. So there's 3 or 4 different ways that you're not actually drinking from a fire hose, but you can get some specific pieces of information as they pertain to you.
Yeah, definitely.
So I can follow up with all those different sources, and you can maybe get them out to the participants.
Okay. Yep. That sounds great.
That works.
Sounds great. Great, thanks, Tim. And before we sign off here, I'm going to share my screen one more time. Again, Tim, thank you so much for the presentation. You're a wealth of knowledge. That was very informative. I'm sure everyone had some really good key takeaways there. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our Oregon Outdoor Recreation Summit sponsors. You can see all of our partner sponsors on the screen here. So thank you everyone for sponsoring this event. And that wraps up our session today. We hope to see everyone at future summit sessions the coming 2 weeks. Thank you so much for joining. Tim, thanks for the presentation, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Welcome. And thankfully the internet held up for an hour.
Yes, yes, that worked out great. All right, thanks. Bye everyone.
Take care.